Cool.
What do you think on like the cultural level, the West needs to do to try and maybe overcome this malaise and this kind of, this lack of control that people think, that this victimhood that people have? And number two, like, how do you actually recommend people to do this in their own lives as well? So we have kind of the cultural kind of macro level and then the micro level as well.
Sure. No, it's a great question. I'll start with the micro, because I believe if you act on the level of the individual, that has a subsequent effect on the culture. So in my experience, it is astounding how many people do not have some form of self-reflective practice that they do every single day. There's several reasons I believe this is the case. I believe first and foremost, we live in a era now, especially in the West, where attention is now a currency, and there are forces outside, even this conversation now, where people are trying to get your attention, right? So attention has become a commodity. It's become an asset that is of extraordinary value, and if you can't court that yourself, best believe other people will. Okay, so the first one is an awareness of that and how valuable it is. Like, you have a certain amount of bandwidth that you can kind of allocate to certain things throughout the day. If you immediately wake up in the morning and start plugging yourself in directly to this, this metaverse, as Zuckerberg would call it, you're going to become, fried before lunch, and now somebody else is, moving your attention, where they want. But if you can spend the first hours of the day dedicated to something intentional, whereby you're allocating that bandwidth to one thing, and typically that one thing is a tool in which you can exercise some kind of self-reflection, I believe that would change the culture. When I say self-reflective practices, this doesn't have to be meditation. I mean, meditation is probably the best, but there are various different forms of meditation. Many people tie meditation to this, very boring concept of sitting in full lotus with listening to, nothing on the floor. That's fine. You can do it that way. But there are various different types. You can do walking meditation. You can do mindfulness meditation. You can do some kind of qigong or tai chi. I imagine there's, a strong cultural emphasis on these kind of practices where you live as well. But it's that I would call some form of internal hygiene.
Yeah.
Some kind of mental hygiene. There isn't, hopefully you do some form of physiological hygiene every single day. The people watching this, you shower, you bath, you have a hose wash in the sink, whatever the case is, right? When is the last time you clean that organ between your ears? You have to do that every single day, because you've got all this input coming in. It's very difficult to pass through, what's important. The analogy I like to use is if your bandwidth is like a big bucket, right? Empty bucket you've got, and every single day, you're getting glasses of good stuff, but also a lot of shit stuff, and you're just pouring it in. Eventually that thing is going to become overflowing with a lot of, polluted crap, and you're not going to be able to start articulating your thoughts intelligently and finding out, well, what's the good pieces of information I need in here, and what's the shit, And you can't do that. It is naive to think you can do that just by sitting in and thinking about it. Won't happen. Journaling, meditation, tai chi, qigong, some form of self-reflection is integral. So that's the first part of your question. And I really do believe that will have a knock-on effect to the latter part of your question, or the former part of your question, which is, how do you address this in a cultural sense? I really do think that the antidote to where the West is going is some form of return to spirituality or religion. I'm very, very, very strong in that belief. I don't mean religion in the dogmatic sense. I believe in some kind of relationship with God, because if you knock, the idea of God or religion or higher power or universe out of the foundation of society, you put yourself there and you become self-serving. And it all revolves around what we're seeing: pleasure. How do I get more pleasure? How do I get more money? How do I get a faster car? How do I get more jewelry? How do I get designer clothes? You're looking in the wrong place. God should be first and foremost. How do I get closer to God? How do I develop a relationship with God? How do I get closer with my family? How do I protect my family? That's where we should be going. And that all stems from a firm awareness that there is a higher power greater than yourselves. That's my answer.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I think one of the major problems we've had, like one of the major kind of like pragmatic kind of cultural benefits of having religion is that it provides like a set of values and a set of beliefs that you cannot be swayed from. And this allows people to be grounded in something that is, you know, in the purest pragmatic sense, it's time proven. It's worked. It's historically been created healthy societies that have lasted the test of time. I encourage anyone to read virtually any religious text and find yourself vehemently disagreeing with anything they say. Like most of it, like, is very, very, very good. And what this provides is it provides people a grounding that means they're less easily manipulated. And I think that's one of the major problems we've got, is that people have lost the religious underpinning has been cut out, and it's left people rootless, where you are then way more easily manipulated by culture,
100%,
by media, by, especially today when media is so pervasive, which, you know, it's always been there, but now with our phones, we are plugged into media 24/7. Like the way that Twitter itself has been designed is to overwhelm your brain with information, so you can't create a cohesive narrative. Like in your brain, you physically.
That's why you need to come back to source. You need to come back to, and I like what you said there about you know, pick up any religious text, pick up any scripture. Again, like people, the reaction you get when you say this is most people, like if you picked a random person out the street, there'd probably be an atheist here, especially in the UK, and they would turn their nose up at it, you know. And I really don't get it. I really don't get how you don't have the curiosity or drive for some kind of exploration outside of yourself, you know. I was raised in I went to Catholic primary school, Catholic secondary school. I never really found an affinity with Catholicism. It may be something that I come back to and explore, but if it's not for you, there's so many different religions out there. And what's curious is that I've found is that there is a continuity in the values and the messages in them. So it's very, you know, my favorite, and I've made no I haven't shied away in making this what would you say, very present on my social media presence. I love Hindu text. I love the Vedas. I think for me, they spoke to something very, very deep in me, and they're very, very accessible. I think everybody can read the Bhagavad Gita and not be kind of blown away by some of the concepts that are coming in there. They're very kind of relatable. But, you know, I read the Quran. I go and do some kind of exploration. Go read the Tao Te Ching. Go read there is something out there for you that can give you that underpinning. And I couldn't have said it better myself. That really is what roots you. Again, you mentioned this idea of just kind of drifting and bumping and blundering and derping into walls. That's what most modern Western men are doing. They're just bumping into walls, because they have no sense of direction, because they have nothing to ground themselves in that's greater than themselves. You know, each paycheck is
fault, right? It's not their fault. It's
no, it's true. It's true.
It's purposeful. I would argue that it's purposeful. I would argue that it's definitely been something that's been, you know, progressively. The fact that there's no pushback against it and there's very little concerted will and effort to push back on these things tells me that there has to be some ulterior goal behind it, or some plan behind it, because you would think that, you know, considering many of the problems that we have that are well evident, it's not like these are hidden things that we talk about, you know, things, you know, simple things like obesity epidemics, mental health problems, things like these things are all understood that are problems, but they're always addressed. They're never addressed on a first principle lens. Like, what is the first principle? What is the cause that is actually the root of all these issues? And it's always kind of like symptomatic. Okay, like you know, for example, diabetes. Okay, like go fasting, right? And yes, that is true. That will help that specific problem. But why is there no kind of wider lens? What's leading people to be fat, right? And it's not just the food supply. That's part of it. but it's also things like what's causing people to have that kind of emptiness within them that causes them to eat. Why are they finding the decision, taking the decision to fill maybe an emotional void that they have with food? It's an addictive behavior for these people. Sugar is the drug, right? It's like, what the fact that there's no, or like fatherlessness is another one, which is, you know, everyone knows that fatherlessness is bad for kids, right? But why do we never address the reasons why fatherlessness is so prevalent? You know, it's all just, yeah, fatherless is bad, we should stay together. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Like, what's the actual cause behind this, and how can we actually have a root fixing? Which is what leads me to think that this is, because you would think there would be at least some part, you know, people aren't stupid. People in power are not stupid. They might be incompetent, but they're not stupid. You would think there'd be one band which somehow gets together and realizes that this is an issue and tries to tackle that. And if there is, why are they not, which I'm sure there is, why are they never represented? Which gets to the deeper issue that this is in some way purposeful. It's not necessarily like, it doesn't have to be like a group of people sat around in a boardroom kind of planning this stuff out, although I never really understood what kind of the rejection of that idea was. It's literally how every company and every government in the world works. But anyway, like, I don't know why that's something to think is ridiculous, but it's another issue. But the key is we've got to get back to this heart of what's really going on, the pure first principle issues. And I agree. I think religion is definitely possibly the heart of that. And I agree. I would if any of you listening to this are in some way feeling somewhat kind of lost or ungrounded, or kind of a little bit lacking that purpose, I would recommend going into some kind of religion. Like, I'm Christian, but I don't use my platform in the evangelical sense. Like, I would just encourage you to find your own path, and I would always argue for that one. But I'm not going to slap anyone around the head. It's up to you. It's your decision. You're your own person. So